Trying to get disability benefits for a loved one with autism can feel like you're trying to solve a maze in the dark. So today, we're going to flip on the lights, we're going to walk through this whole process, and hopefully give you a much clearer path forward. Look, if you're feeling totally overwhelmed, maybe even a little frustrated by all this, I get it. You are definitely not alone. It is a super complex system, and our goal today is to give you a clear step-by-step map to get you through it. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start by looking at the benefits maze itself. Then we'll dive into the specific qualifications for autism. After that, we'll tackle the all-important function report, touch on hearings and child support, and then wrap up with your path forward. All right, let's step into the maze. But before we do, we have to remember, this isn't just about forms and rules. For the families going through it, it's a really emotional journey, and it's full of some pretty unique challenges. You know, this quote from someone who went through it really captures the heart of that struggle. It's a tough road, for sure, but it's one that many people share. And just knowing that is a good first step. We're here to help you with the rest. So where do all the rules of this maze even come from? Well, they're set by the Social Security Administration, or the SSA, and to get through, you first have to understand their very specific qualifications for autism spectrum disorder. Okay, first things first, and this is crucial. There are two totally different programs. For kids with autism, you're almost always applying for SSI, and it is strictly needs-based. And honestly, this is often the biggest hurdle because the SSA looks directly at the parent's income and resources. So what does needs-based actually mean in the real world? Well, to give you a solid example, a single parent with one autistic child cannot earn more than about $38,000 a year, and that's pre-tax. These super strict income limits are the #1 reason applications for children get denied. So, let's say you clear that financial hurdle. The next step is all about the medical side of things. The SSA has this guide they call the Blue Book, and you need to think of this as your key. It lays out the exact medical criteria that have to be met to get approved. So, Part A of the criteria is the diagnosis itself. You have to have official medical documentation proving these 3 core things. We're talking reports from pediatricians, psychological evaluations, notes from therapists. All of that is absolutely essential. But here's the thing, a diagnosis is not enough. Part B is all about the impact. You have to prove that the condition severely limits daily life. Think of an extreme limitation as pretty much a total inability to function in one of these areas. Marked means it's a very serious limitation, but maybe not total. The SSA needs to see either one extreme limitation or 2 marked ones. Okay, so you understand the medical rules. Now, how in the world do you communicate all those limitations to the SSA? Well, that brings us to what is probably one of the most important forms you will ever fill out in this process. This is the function report, and believe me, it is so much more than just a form. It is your chance to paint a really detailed picture of day-to-day reality for the person who's reviewing your case. The answers you put here are absolutely 100% critical. Now, this is probably the single most important piece of advice with the entire application. Be brutally honest about the worst days. The SSA needs to understand the limitations. If you only talk about what you can do on a good day, they're going to assume you can do that every day. And that's a fast track to a denial. Let's just look at a quick example. A bad answer is super vague. I walk my dog. Sounds pretty capable, right? But a good answer is specific, and it hones in on the limitation. It explains the why behind the struggle. That little bit of specific detail, it makes all the difference in the world to the SSA. All right, so here are your key takeaways for this form. Be consistent. Never ever leave a question blank. Be honest, but don't downplay the challenges. And always, always focus on explaining the limitations and the changes you have to make just to get through the day. Now, this whole journey doesn't always end with that first application. So let's talk about what might happen next, specifically 2 really important situations: appealing a denial and going to a hearing, and how all these benefits can affect child support.
First off, it is incredibly common for claims to be denied initially, so please don't panic. You have the right to appeal. If you do end up with a hearing, the whole point is just for the judge to understand your story. It's not some formal trial, so just show up a little early and wear whatever's comfortable. You want to reduce your stress.
Now, speaking of financial support, there's a specific kind of benefit that a lot of people just completely miss. If a parent is already getting their own disability benefits, their minor child might also be eligible for a separate payment. And this has a special name. It's called a derivative benefit.
So how does this work with child support? Well, the process is actually pretty straightforward. The disabled parent lets the custodial parent know, and then the custodial parent applies to the SSA for the child's benefit. That money goes right to the custodial parent, and, now this is the key part, it usually reduces the other parent's child support payment by that exact same amount.
Let's make that crystal clear with a really simple example. Let's say the child's derivative benefit is $300 a month, and the disabled parent's child support payment is also $300 a month. Well, that child support obligation just became zero. The credit is dollar for dollar. Wow, okay, we've covered a lot of ground. The rules, the paperwork, some pretty specific situations. Now, let's pull it all together and talk about your path forward from here. You might be wondering, why does all this matter so much? This quote really says it all. For so many parents, these benefits are an absolute lifeline. They make it possible for a parent to cut back their hours or even stop working altogether to provide that constant 24/7 care their child might need. So as you move forward, just remember these key pillars for a strong application. First, know your financial path. Is it SSI or SSDI? Second, use that blue book as your guide. Third, tell your real story through the lens of limitations on that function report. And all of this is tied together by one crucial thread: detailed, consistent documentation. That is your most powerful tool. So we'll leave you with this final thought. You now have the map. The only question is, what is the first step you're going to take on your path forward? Whether that's gathering your records or starting that report, you can now move ahead with a lot more confidence. And we really do wish you the best on your journey.